Hey, good evening, guys. We're going to take a look at No Retreat, the Russian Front by GMT Games, published around 2011. Probably earlier than that. Is this the second edition? No, this is the first edition. All right, 2011 by GMT. But I was just on the interwebs, and I remember this game when Victory Point Games published it as one of their desktop published type games. And I remember being pretty interested in it, but I wasn't a big fan of the components of Victory Point games back then, especially when a game of this size and what they were asking for it. So, but then I heard that GMT was printing some of their games. That was back in that era when they were just coming out. Oh, GMT's going to reprint some of these Victory Point games, but they never told you which ones. Well, this was one of them. And when GMT printed it, I decided, what the hell, I'm going to pull the trigger because the components are excellent, and, so forth. It's a game that stood the test of time. There's multiple volumes in the series now. But this is a quick look at. That's what I was. I could not find any videos or reviews of the Victory Point game version of this game. All I could find was the GMT version. The first one here from 2011. I couldn't find a Victory Point game version video of it. So I'd be curious to find one. If somebody knows where one is, I'd like to see it. But anyway, here's the box art for this GMT version of it. It's all right, I guess. It's black and white. I like black and white art. This is okay. Game comes with 2 die, a red and a gray one, Russian and German, of course. Why not? A deck of cards, which are sealed. I've not opened these since 2011. There's the Russian Joker. Look at him. Look at him. That reminds me of the United States administration of today, 2023. Let's go, Brandon. Comes with a rule book. Whoops. Some errata. A little sheet of errata. It tells you to delete the following statement from Rule 10.1.1. Just one little sheet. One little rule change. I'm sure that's changed since 2011. I think this game may have like living rules or something. I'm not sure. Here we have the rule book. Semi-gloss paper. It's got an index on the back, which is always great. Very handy. 24 pages. The actual rules themselves. Oh, they're going to come in at about 19 and a half pages. And then there's about a page full of optional rules. I always go from the rear to let's try going from the front to the back instead of from the back to the rear. Here's the introduction, game equipment, component overview, your unit types. You have infantry, regional, fortified, shock, panzer grenadier or mech infantry, and panzer or tank units. And then these are giving you an explanation of the numbers. You have a combat strength and movement allowance. Sometimes the color of the combat strength, like for instance, this combat strength is 3 in black. It can attack and defend. This number is in white, which means it can only defend. It cannot attack. This unit has no zone of control. We'll get to those. This one has no combat strength. Why? I don't know. Here it's going over an explanation of the cards, the parts of the cards, what they mean, how to use them. Sequence of play. housekeeping. Then you go to the Axis player turn. What? Axis player. Oh, yeah. There's an Axis player turn with all these sub-phases, or all these phases. And then there's a Soviet player turn, which is exactly these phases over except for the Soviet. Okay. Now, then it's going over the cards, how appropriate timing, how to play the cards, how to use them to their best advantage, I guess is what they mean by timing. You know, why you should play this card before that one and so forth. This card's just going over the card play. Then it's going over supply, full color example, very clear. It's going over blocking supply paths, so you can put units out of supply. And then, of course, we're talking about unsupplied units. What happens when your unit is unsupplied? This is about organizations of units, like what units fall under what command. You have flipping units over to the reduced side, if there is one. Excuse me. Then we're going over movement. We have a rail movement, some combat. Rail movement generally lets you move longer distances, but you can't be next to an enemy unit at the end of that movement. Generally. This is going over the battle sequence, how to conduct counter blows. Your enemy can place markers to force attacks from you, which may thwart your attacks you had planned. That's a very interesting twist to this game. That's what makes this game great. Here's some a combat example of play. Then we have the advance after combat, marker unit removal phase. Now it's telling you how to win. After they tell you how to play, then they tell you how to win. So you really don't know why you're doing what it tells you to do. But then at the end, it tells you why you're doing what you want. I think this should be at the beginning of the game. But anyway, and it tells you how to win the game. Victory, point hexes, there's a bunch of ways to win. There's going over events, there's weather, support markers. Here's special units on page. You know what? There's really only about 16, 17 pages of rules. And then a couple pages going over special units and rules, the events and the weather, support markers and so forth. Here's some Volkstrom units. Then you hit the optional rules. That's a look at the rule book, I guess. There's a scenario booklet. Got a counter manifest at the back, which is always nice to have. All the counters that should be involved in your game are right here. So you can always make sure you have them all. This is different scenarios. Here's Barbarossa in the campaign game. And then there's smaller little scenarios you can play. Here's Fall Blue or Fall Blah, however you say that. Operation Saturn, Citadel, Operation Bagration, on to Berlin. Then there's a tournament scenario here. And then there's a bunch of designer notes. So the scenario book is really only 9 pages long. Well, 8.5. Then there's a bunch of designer notes. Bunches and bunches of designer notes, which are very easy. Here's some player notes. And here's some examples of play. And the rest of the book, about halfway through, the rest of the book's nothing but a big example of play until you get to page 20. Here's your card manifest. Here's where it lists all the cards you should have in your deck. And then it goes into the counter manifest. There's a player aid card, 2 of them, double-sided. A little bit thin and flimsy cardstock. Pretty damn flimsy and pretty damn thin cardstock. Semi-gloss. It's got your combat results table, terrain effects chart, turn record track, so forth. And it's got the sequence of play on it. Man, these are thin compared. That's pretty thin. But you get 2 of them, 1 for each player. They're identical. I guess 1 you would use for the... I don't know. Here's the counter sheets. I've not punched or opened them. They're sealed in a plastic bag. And then here's the map, which is hard mounted and sealed in a plastic bag. And I'm not going to fold this big. Man, that thing folds out so big. But it includes a terrain effects chart on it. And a combat. It's got all your tables. Babadi. Wow. Looks like these areas aren't being... You can't move into these areas. This is the... But it's a fold-out, hard-mounted map. And it was a big hit back in the day. It was a big hit when Victory Point Games produced it. And it was a big, even bigger hit, or at least the same as big a hit as when GMT did it. So... What struck my attention about doing this video to begin with was I looked up to see if I could find any Victory Point game reviews of this No Retreat, the Russian front, and I couldn't find any. So that, I don't want to say introduced me, but it influenced me to make the video about this GMT version. Simply so I could talk about not being able to find a Victory Point Games version of this online anywhere. Maybe there is, and I just didn't find it. That wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't be the first time that's happened. But, hey, thanks for watching, fellas. I appreciate it. Have a good night.